He worked his way through college as a roofer, imagine that, and he enlisted in the Army in 2000 and was named Soldier of the Year for the 104th Division. That gives me chills. You know, he's been a representative in the state legislature, and then he voluntarily went back to serve in Iraq, and we thank him for his service. But you know, he supports lower taxes, he wants to repeal Obamacare, and he understands how important energy is to America. And that's exactly why Tea Party Express is here to support and endorse him and to work with all of you, because you're going to rise up. Let's stand up, you guys. Come on, stand up, get on your feet. It's going to take some energy, but we are going to elect him as your next congressman for the 1st District here in Arizona. Jonathan Paton.
Thank you. Well, I said it a little while ago, I love the reaction so much, I want to say it again. I'm Jonathan Paton, and I'm the guy who's going to beat Ann Kirkpatrick for Arizona's first congressional district. It was talked a little bit about my time in the Army, and I want to tell you a couple stories, and I'm going to turn it over, but we have any veterans out here today? Raise your hands. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, National Guard, Reserve, Coast Guard, thank you so much for your service to this great nation. And most of you who served, you either had a drill sergeant, or you had a drill instructor, or you had somebody really mean telling you what to do at some point in your time in the military. I got some good advice from my drill sergeant. He told me this is the nicest thing he ever did, and I wish I would have followed it. He said, never volunteer for anything. He said, make sure you never volunteer for an experimental program, and never be that guy that the drill sergeant knows by name. After my first year in the legislature, I got a phone call from the United States Army. And they said, LT, we want you to volunteer for something. And it's an experimental program. And so I said yes, and I ended up in a great place that summer called Fort Benning, Georgia, and it was a little something called infantry school. But I decided I was going to do my best to keep that third thing. I wasn't going to be the guy that was going to be the one that the drill sergeant or the TAC officer knew by name. So I never told anyone that I was serving in the Arizona State Legislature while I was in infantry school. And it was in 2 weeks before we were to finish, I was guarding the orderly room. And I got a phone call on my cell phone. And no, you're not allowed to have cell phones in infantry school, in case you were wondering. I answered the phone, and it was my assistant back in Arizona, and she said, Mr. Paton, we have that bill you wanted drafted, and we'd like to send it to you. Well, there in the orderly room, there is a fax machine sitting there, innocently enough. And I looked at it, and I thought that one thing that always gets you in trouble. No one will ever know. So I gave her the fax number, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. And it was like watching a pot of water waiting for it to boil, because it never boils. And all of a sudden, I felt this presence behind me. It was like a disturbance in the force or something. And there was my TAC officer, and he said, LT, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm guarding the orderly room, sir. He said, not anymore, you're not. You're going to clean out the latrines. Which is a perfect thing for any lawmaker or any politician to have to do.
Amen.
So I started scrubbing the latrines, and you kind of lose yourself in the job after a while. And then I felt that presence again, that disturbance in the force. And there he was with a stack of papers in his hands, and he slammed them down. And there at the top it said, Arizona State House of Representatives, Jonathan Paton. And he looked at me and he said, so, I guess your daddy's a real bigwig back in Arizona, huh? And I said, sir, that's not my dad. And he said, well, why would your brother have the same name as you? And I said, sir, that's not my brother. And he looked at me and he said, LT, what are you doing? And I said, sir, every morning at 4:30 I ask myself that very same question. One of the most important things that happened to me that summer is at the end of my time there, they started talking about where the different soldiers were going, these new lieutenants, where they were sending them. And one was going to go to Kandahar, one was going to go to Krit, one was going to go to Fallujah. This was in 2006. And they got to my name and they said, well, he's that politician guy. He doesn't have to go anywhere. And that really bothered me. When I got home, they had a form. They said you can fill out and send it to the Army, send it to the Pentagon. You'll never have to serve a day in combat. Well, I filled out a different letter. I volunteered to serve because this is the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and it needs leaders who lead from the front, not from the rear. Amen. While I was there, one of the most important things that happened to me, I was called to go all over the theater of operations, from Bucha in the south all the way up to Kirkuk in the north, to Tikrit, Fallujah, Baghdad, and Balad. I flew everywhere with my soldiers. And one day, I was ordered to go to the flight line and catch a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter and fly it over Diyala province. I arrived on the flight line, ready to catch my flight, and they said, Lieutenant, you can't do it because we've already put a National Guard unit on this flight. You're not going to be able to go. So I went back to Camp Slayer, and later on that evening, I heard the news that a Black Hawk helicopter had been shot down over Diyala province. There is not a day in my life that goes by that I do not think about the sacrifice of those young men and women, the blessings that God gave me that I was able to come home. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no more important lesson in this world than to appreciate your life, appreciate this great country, and appreciate the liberties that we've been given. Now, I think about why those soldiers were serving in harm's way in the first place, and it is very clear why they were there. Because a gentleman just told me a little bit earlier, he said he swore an oath. I swore that oath. If you're a veteran, you swore that oath. That oath was not to a president, it wasn't to a king, it was to the Constitution of the United States. That's what this country is all about. And when you look at what has happened in this country, it is a disgrace how we are slowly but surely destroying that Constitution and the words that were written, that the blood that was shed for this Constitution. I don't recognize what has happened to this country. Some years ago, if you would have told me that General Motors would be owned by the government, I never would have believed you. If you would have told me that the government would control our healthcare system, I never would have believed you. If you would have told me that the commander-in-chief of this nation would bow to a king in a foreign country, I never would have believed you. And my mother came out to Flagstaff. First she went to Tuba City in the 50s to teach school. And she came out to Flagstaff and married my father in a little church not far from where we are right now. And she used to tell me stories about my grandfather. And he was a farmer, a sharecropper in a place called Hickory Flat, Mississippi. And she said that he was a poor man, but he said the greatest thing is in this country, it doesn't matter because you don't have a ruler, you don't have a king, you have a president that's elected, and you don't have to bow to anyone in this nation, especially the President of the United States. And Mr. President, we're not going to bow to Obamacare, we're not going to bow to the stimulus, and we're not going to bow to all of these different issues that you're trying to force on the American people. Now here's the deal. I'm going to tell it to you straight. There's been 3 polls that have been done in this election. And every single one of these polls demonstrates one thing. It is within 3 points between myself and Ann Kirkpatrick. And it may be difficult for you to see in Flagstaff, but this is a giant district. If you are able to elect the mayor that you were able to elect, if you're able to elect the city councilman you were able to elect, we can win this race in Congressional District 1 starting here in Flagstaff. I promise you. That is in your hands. I need your help. It's this close. It's this close between, not between winning and losing, between liberty and tyranny. I'm going to leave you with this. At Fort Benning, there was a place there that I and my fellow lieutenants, we call Building 4. And it's otherwise known throughout the Army as Infantry Hall. And it's a storied place. And it's trained some of the best soldiers, the best Army the world has ever known. And there is an image there. It is an image of a soldier. And his right arm is raised. And he's leading troops forward. Wherever you may go, whatever you may do, you'll hear it. Cadences that soldiers call when they march, the greetings they give one another as they salute. Follow me. The reply is always the same. Lead the way. The officers, the soldiers, Marines, airmen, the sailors that I served with, they led the way. And in our hearts, and in this nation's heart, they will always lead the way. I'm Jonathan Paton. I'm running for Congress, and I'm asking for your help. Thank you very much.
I apologize for pronouncing your name wrong. Yes, you guys get on your feet, and what is your website?
www.paton2012.com. Paton 2012.com. Give till it hurts, or it's going to cost a lot more in the next Congress, I guarantee you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. God bless you. And he has a table right over here with yard signs and other information, so please, before you leave here, be sure to stop by.